smiled with such love, and he said, well, I've given you a little extra time to prepare for it, haven't you? But he was very sweet, and whatever we asked him to do, he would do that. And that was a great, great challenge. With Mother, it was easier. You didn't have to think. Just do whatever she told you to do. Most people who are fully German are 100%. Mother was 101% German. I don't know how she got the extra percent in there. And she knew exactly what she wanted. And how do you help somebody in that situation when they are doing the wrong thing? But we learned how to handle that. And I learned how to lovingly, but sometimes firmly, say, no, we're not going to do that. And then we just pray that the ceiling didn't fall in, and it didn't. But you learn how to do these things. If your heart is loving, if you're being led by the Lord, and take time before you speak. And I'm talking to myself mostly in all of that. That's how you deal with the different age groups. Now, in church, you're going to have situations with those who are needy. And there are 3 categories in the Bible of people who are needy, and God takes special care of them. One is widows. Secondly, the fatherless. Thirdly, aliens. And over again in the Old Testament and the New, God says, I am watching out for you because you have special needs. The aliens are pretty obvious. And all of us have been aliens in one environment or another. And our forefathers, if not we, came to this country as aliens. And they deserve special care and special attention. Widows were then and now still an object of need. And I think we can put a new category in, which was not so well known at that time, and that is the divorcee. There are so many cases now of divorce, 50+% in the non-Christian world. I've heard as much as 55% Christian marriages going bad. I've heard it as low as 40%. In many of them, it's much too high. But when you've got a divorce situation, that divorcee is pretty much functioning as a widow, if the support's not there. And so we're talking really about how to handle situations of those in need. But here he's talking about the widows. And he talks about the fact that there are older widows and there are younger widows, and the difference is all important to how to handle them in the church. We take care of the older widows, and the younger ones are to go out and get married and to raise families. Beginning in verse 3. Honor widows who are really widows. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. Now she who is really a widow and left alone trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. But she who lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. And these things command that they may be blameless. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, well reported for good works. If she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. So the widows who are over 60 years of age are to be treated separately. They're to be taken onto the rolls of the church, which is the idea here, the roles of providing for them. In verse 3 it says, you honor them who are really widows. No, it's truly they're left alone. They have no family, they have nobody to take care of them. To honor them means to not only show respect, but take care of them. Verse 4, if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. It means you take care of your parents when they need it. The idea is they took care of you when you were young and you needed them, and now the role is reversed. And so we need to take care of those who are our parents. So the idea here is show your piety at home. The Pharisees had a saying in their day that Jesus would really come against. And the idea centers around a word called Corban, not a word that we use. But the idea was the Pharisee would say that he had money that could help his parents who needed it desperately, but it's Corban. It's been set aside for God. So here I am, I have $100,000, my parents are destitute, and the money's sitting in my bank account, and I could help them. But that $100,000 is Corban. It is dedicated to God. Oh, I can use it. But I can't give it to my parents to take care of them. And Jesus blasted them and said, you're phonies. You take care of your family. You show your piety at home, and you use that money to meet their needs. They did it for you, you do it for them. And so he says, you repay them, for this is good and it's acceptable before God. And that's something we all need to do. Now, not all of us are called to do what I did, where you give up your residence and you get a home and you staff a situation to take care of your family. And it wasn't my first option. We had put them in assisted living for about a year, and we saw it was not working. Not working from their perspective, not working from mine, and it was not a good alternative for us. And so we had this set up, and it was something that was helpful to them. They had their desire to be able to pass away at home, to have their lives exactly as they wanted them to, and I'm just grateful that I had that opportunity. Not all have that. But there are those who are critical of those who take care of their family. And I was lucky to be able to still have this job. Many do not have that. And I'll be honest with you, I got the work done and you never knew what went on for those 7 years. But I'll tell you where I slept. And it was not at home, and it was not in my bed. It was downstairs in that little back room in front of my radio recorder, and I was learning to sleep in 10-minute intervals. I couldn't turn the phone off. I had to make sure it was constantly on call, and I learned how to get a full day's sleep on a series of 10-minute times of sleep. It was unbelievable. I'm not saying to try it, but when you have to, you do. Now, most folks couldn't do that. They'd lose their job. I had a good boss. The Lord was understanding, and he gave me grace that you never knew until now. So that worked out well for me. But there are those who've had to leave their jobs, go home and take care of their parents. They're in their 60s. And they have to leave their employment, and they're out of work for 6 and 7 years, and now suddenly with mother and dad gone, they're available to work at age 69. And who wants them? But God takes care of them. You put the Lord first in your heart, but he says you take care of your family. Piety begins at home. Now verse 5, she who was really a widow and left alone, she's trusting in God, and she's continuing in supplications and prayers night and day. She's a woman who puts God first. Is she of any value praying for us night and day? Mildred, your dear grandmother, was a woman of prayer. She would be in the kitchen or wherever she was, and she was praying for the nations. 95, 96, 97, 98 she made, didn't she?
2 days shy.
2 days shy of 98 years old. Was she of any value? No, her family took care of her. We never did have to take care of Mildred. 2 days shy of 98. A woman of God, prayers and supplications for the saints. In heaven we'll find out the value of those prayers. Now, she who lives in pleasure, on the other hand, is dead while she lives. She indulges herself. She cares nothing about God. She doesn't pray for the saints. All she thinks about is herself and her own pleasures. She's dead while she lives. Isn't that a pretty sobering thought, huh? And that can apply to young people too. As we are in sin, we are dead, separated from God and his power and his love. Oh, we're still saved, but we're not really experiencing that salvation as we should. And so as we are in indulgence, we are dead while we live. Now he says in verse 7, I want you to command these things, that these widows are to be blameless. And if they've got people at home to take care of them, they need to take care of their mother or grandmother. Verse 8, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. How about that? If you don't provide, talking about money? Yep. But you might provide money for your mother or your grandmother, but no comfort. I don't want to see the old bag. I don't want to spend time with her. All she does is talk about her dentures not fitting right, and on. So I'll see her at Christmas time, right? Are you not providing for her? She has needs to get to the doctor's office, wants a little fellowship, a little companionship. There are many ways to provide. One of the challenges that I had from Mother and Dad as they were getting into their late 80s and into 90. And first of all, I saw the great mystique. We have a bunch of long-lived people in our families. 96, 97, 98. I was kind of interested in that and was kind of romanticized until I actually lived with people who got to be 88, 89, 90, 91, incontinent, changing diapers. And I said, Lord, and pray this for me. When I go, I want to go like Smith Wigglesworth. Remember him, the great evangelist out of England? Smith was about 86 years of age, and he went to a funeral, and he walked up onto the pulpit to greet some people sitting up there, and he reached out his hand, and he was gone, and he was in the presence of the Lord. In the saddle, dressed for ministry, ready to work, and went home. Pray that for me if you would, please. In any event, getting old is not for sissies, somebody said, and that's true. It is not easy. And to provide for their needs, I'll tell you very frankly, I felt many times like being a nursing home administrator. If you are an administrator, nursing home, forgive me. But I'll tell you, the smartest thing to do from a business point of view is drug them. Get them so out of it, they do not call for you, they don't ring their buzzers, and when you want to attend to them, when the state requires it, then you do it, right? Now, the big challenge I had was this. Mother and Dad are going downhill physically. God, by your grace, may I help to maintain them mentally. And the Lord showed me how to maintain them, and it took work. It took work. The last thing I wanted to do at the end of a busy day, half sleeping, half working, half groggy, is go home and take my shift with Mother. She'd say, what happened at church? I felt like saying nothing happened at church. But that was her life. And the Lord said, you minister to her mind, and you talk to her, and you challenge her, and you engage her in conversation, and do that with your dad. Keep them active mentally. Get Dad on the computer. Get Mother on Netflix. She was like those old movies, you know, with the little guys, James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson, all those fellas. I used to tease her and say, you married a Jewish guy. You like the Jewish guys like Edward G. Robinson. And she loved those old fellas. But the Lord said, keep them active mentally. And they were as clear as a bell to the day they passed. Now, it was a lot easier just to let them go. Just drug them and leave them alone. But the Lord said, challenge them. So there are many ways to provide. And how do you provide? The way God does.